by the time people move into positions of feeling like they know what they're doing, have some sort of expertise in their field, they might perchance follow that model and think they should be telling people how things
Mm.
are. But in fact, if we take the human being into account, we're undermining their humanity when we do that. Yeah, so, one of the great principles of person-centered therapy is actually it's our job to grow the person, to help the person grow, not to solve their problems per se.
Mhm.
If we can help people grow, they can solve their own problems. So yeah, collaboration then just becomes, an essential cog in that wheel.
True to the intent of this podcast series, you have walked into a conversation with Garry and I. That's what I mean by intent. It was going to be conversations with Garry and Andrea on the couch. We forgot to say hi and introduce ourselves, so this intro is that. In this episode, Garry and I talk about many things therapy and what therapy needs to look like for therapists and therapies. Not a real word, but I'm going with it. I also let some things go through the keeper rather than edit them out because we are real people. We have tech issues, and I hope you giggle like we do. The key point of this podcast is to talk about the principles of trauma informed care, this episode anyway. The intention was to do this from a therapy point of view, like a therapist's, but we do unravel that the principles apply to friendships and healthy relationships as well. So it's worth a listen for that. With time, I'm going to share more content about the challenges we face in life and what to do about them, as well as tips for trauma recovery. This is from a lived experience lens, but also as a human helping lens, because I work with a lot of people and I've worked with so many people. I hope you enjoy this episode, and please do like, share, subscribe, and self-care. And I'll see you at the end for a recap and a chat about how to take action in your life.
So I'm talking about counseling code of ethics, trauma aside now, because it is slightly amended for trauma, but counseling in general, if you go to the ACA code of ethics, that's the Australian Counselling Association, they have 5 core principles. And if you go to PACFA, the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, they have 6. That's
Yep.
changed. That's changed over time. I've been teaching for a lot of years, and that has changed over time. But just in line with what you're saying here around peer support, the one that got added from PACFA as an ethical obligation for counselors is self-care.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
It is a good one, and of course, it's very important, but it's often the last thing that people pay attention to, right? People who are in the caring professions tend to not care for themselves that much. It's the nature of the beast. But so, can we just read what peer support says there? We can talk about the other ones, but
Yeah,
so
I'm in real trouble with my laptop. Can you give me just 1 second?
it's big enough to read. I can read that.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'm recording.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, good.
Is your little recording light on? Yeah, mine is. So we'll talk about those other ones, but I just want to read peer support. It says individuals with shared experiences are integrated into the organization and viewed as integral to the service delivery. Okay.
Sometimes I feel like that's tokenistic. It really is sometimes tokenistic, but sometimes it's done well.
Yeah.
Um, for me, I also read that as being connected with people with similar experiences, full stop.
Yeah. The one below it, humility and responsiveness, biases and stereotypes and historical trauma are recognized and addressed. Yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. What that's talking about is um, it's so another thing that's embedded in all counseling trainings these days is they call it multicultural approaches, but actually it goes beyond culture, and we're talking about diversity, and that everybody needs to be treated as an individual, in fact, right? Because our family is a part of our culture, and my family culture, even if I'm also Anglo, and most other Anglo people think they can pretty much judge my cultural background.
Mm,
My specific family is integral to my um, view of the world, what I think is right and wrong, and so on. So that's pretty accurate for me to recognize that responsiveness to the individual rather than to some sort of formulaic response to how I think
mm.
people are because they're white Western males or white Western
Well, but
females or whatever.
I remember my first husband, he used to get quite upset because he actually worked with Indigenous groups in a specific council, and they all judged him as English basically because he was white, like he was a perpetrator of their violence, except for he was actually Scottish. And some of the exact same things happened to the Scots as happened to the Indigenous Australians, and they lost their language as well.
Yeah.
And he
And
would
lost
actually,
their land and
yeah,
culture as well.
yeah, they lost so much. And the one thing, like, I wrote a story about it, and I like acknowledged that. I guess the one difference is how people treat colored people differently. But like in terms of historical trauma and people understanding each other, that's something that does actually get missed
Yes.
by a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. Again, we talk about historical or intergenerational problem. I can't remember if we've said that on here. Um, but but it I've been teaching a few weekends recently as well, and it always comes up when you're training counselors, and I in particular work with more men than women, and and I'm Canadian. I guess people know that, or you could guess. But I grew up in a family. My father was in World War II, and his father was in World War One, and and when I came here, people talked about intergenerational trauma in relation to Indigenous people, and other people railed against, intergenerational trauma. Well, we didn't do it, just as your husband's response was, because in fact it was, in a certain sense, the Anglo culture, although it was perpetrated on the Scots by the English as well. Um, so the way that really came to understand intergenerational trauma is what I'm talking about. How my father was shaped by a father who'd been to war, in fact, had been damaged in the war. Um, uh, and yeah, so here I was a third generation who could very likely be expected to go to war based on their experiences, at least. And so, should I be raised to be a sensitive, vulnerable, whole person? Probably not, right? I'd get destroyed in war.
Yeah, and that's a good like lens to put on it too. Like if they did do that, yeah, you'd get destroyed in war. But also we didn't have back then the amount of access and amount of information
No.
that we have now. Like
Yeah.
how easy is ugh, information is accessible.
Yeah.
We just Googled that and then we can sit there and have a discussion about it. Whereas,
Yeah.
my mum mum and dad used to say, you didn't come with a manual. And I was like, actually, there's libraries, you guys. As soon as I could read and went to a library, I was like, actually, you could find a book if you want one.
Yeah.
Um, but when they were younger, that actually probably wasn't quite the case.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. So as for those other principles of working with trauma, um, did you want to put them up again? Let's talk to those. Is that our task today?
Well, the task was the 5 ones, so I'll get you the 5 ones if you like, because
Yeah.
that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Okay.
I only found one picture. See if you like it, I'll share it.
And I think it's probably worth saying again for people who might be listening to this that when we're talking about trauma, we're really talking about developmental trauma, which is a form of complex PTSD, because it is so much more prevalent than incidental trauma. And that So that needs to be said in light of these five principles of working with trauma.
Would you
Uh,
be able to just because some people won't know what those words mean, like developmental trauma versus incidental trauma. I can give it a go, or you can give it a go.
Incidental trauma, I don't think is actually a word, but we're talking about one-off traumas. So
Mm.
I think that when I was young, we grew up thinking a traumatic event happened, and therefore I am traumatized by a car crash or by, a bomb landing near my home or something like that, or, the sudden death of a parent or something like that. So those indeed can create trauma. They generally would create acute trauma, and that's kind of like shock. We go into shock. And if that's not dealt with well, and that means with the support of others and with information, then that can develop into PTSD.
Mm.
But what we used to call PTSD, what first became known as PTSD, so again, I've just talked about the war generation and um, it- this whole understanding of trauma, I think, well, it was certainly developed after the wars. And in those days, it was called shell shock. People came back with shell shock. They couldn't function very well because noises scared them and God knows what else, really. But what we would now call that that became known as PTSD. But so complex PTSD is prolonged exposure over a period of time to life-threatening or severe, um, circumstances of fear, let's say. I'm not being very articulate to that.
Wow.
Um, but it's though that prolonged um, situation that makes us live in our jangly nervous system. And so we develop this sort of hypersensitivity, and that's what we know as complex trauma.
Yeah, and is it more recent that it's what did you just say it also is called?
Well, I'll talk about developmental trauma
That's
now.
yeah,
Yes.
I was just gonna say another thing that I've read in quite a few places about complex PTSD. It's not only prolonged, but also you're trapped. So you can't
Yes.
get out. And that for me, honestly, not why do people say honestly? It's weird. Like you'd lie. But anyway, part of my business issues for me was I felt trapped. Like, because I trapped myself in a business that wasn't going very well. Does it make sense?
So,
Mm.
that's an interesting thing to say. So are people, soldiers fighting in the war in the trenches for 3 years in France on the battlefield? Are they trapped? Well, they are trapped,
They
right?
don't have autonomy to just leave if they want.
They don't? No,
Yeah.
that's right. So personal agency becomes a factor. Do I have any choice? So when we move that whole constellation of things into the early years at home, we are also trapped because we're not able to function without our parents when we're children. If our parents are also the source of our terror or our fears, um, then it becomes what we just talked about over a prolonged period of time. I feel unsafe. But those early years, which are our biggest developmental years, the brain never stops forming, as we now know, but it certainly is on a much more rapid uh, trajectory in those very early years. Um, so the foundation of personality is forming in those early years. So that's what's meant by developmental trauma. When
Yeah.
it,
Go on, sorry.
no, I should also specify that it's not always the parents.
Mm.
It can be the pervert who lives next door. Whatever makes us feel unsafe. In fact, some of my clients In school, they were bullied from the earliest age and it went on for years.
Mm,
So that's also developmental trauma.
yeah. Now, shall I find a picture of the 5 duplexies? I did find one. I'll just find it.
That's a therapeutic term, isn't it? Duplex.
Duplexies. Um, okay, so let's try this again. I tried to make it more fancy.
So
Fancy.
what we just call developmental trauma, by the way, other people might hear the term relational trauma, which is the same thing. And we talked about so now we're going to talk about attachment theory. I'm going to mention attachment theory because it's also in those very early years that the seeds are sown. I think generally people would agree for life in our attachments, our relationships, that all takes place in the very earliest years. So developmental trauma might also be referred to as relational trauma. It kind of implies that it affects two different things. One is our holistic development, and the other is specifically relationships, and both are true.
Mm. I know we were going to do a podcast on attachment theory. I think we did do one. I have
But
to sit there and save them all properly and archive them properly and
I
publish
think
them.
we did, yeah,
Yeah. So we've talked about okay, let's go. So we talked about several kinds of trauma and then looking at the 5 principles of trauma informed care. It's
yeah,
interesting, like for me, I've been coming to this lately as a worker again as well. Um, but then also in that space with the lens of I need to look after myself.
yeah,
And then thinking about this conversation primarily, so this sounds really confusing, as a client. So like I was thinking if you could, I don't know if we explain what they mean. And I think we talked last week about me saying about what I need. And I even thought about like what happens if I don't get what I need.
yeah.
Like
So
it's yes.
so so we can do both of these, include you and your experiences as I mean, those principles, they don't need much explanation, but let's talk about the principles and why those principles are so important because they do differ from when I talked about the 5 ethical principles for counselors. Generally speaking, these differ. They overlap, but they differ.
Mm,
And so one of the key things here, like when we look at safety and trust, you might say for counselors in the counseling code of ethics, um, they are maybe combined, right? If people can trust you, they feel safe. But here we have to talk about safety first. So when you talk about the workplace, I suspect you could develop good relationships in the workplace. So that's the trust if you felt safe. Is that true?
yeah, yeah. Like trust is earned over time. And if I consistently feel safe, I'll relax into feeling trusting.
Yes. Well said. And so safety first in working with trauma. And, as I say to my students, first year students, when I teach these things, why would that be? I don't mean to be putting any pressure on you to respond to that.
I wrote some notes. So why did you want to say something about why safety first?
Well, if you wrote some notes, you jump in.
Sure. Well, I thought about things that if yeah, like my home needs to be safe and secure. Like so I have to have enough money to pay my rent, which means my job and my work needs to be safe and secure. And like some people say, and I'm not sure I agree with it, but some people say you need to be safe before you can have therapy. So, like, if you're in domestic violence or if you're drinking, they don't really want to give you therapy. And it's like, well, working with someone to make sure that those things are secure. So, like your home, money, work. Because for me, if any of those things come unraveled, with my second husband, I was getting bullied at work and it changed our relationship dynamic. And he felt like so Originally, I felt safe with him and I could sleep properly. Sleep's an issue that I have. And then when we got together, I could sleep and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool. I feel safe. I can sleep. Woohoo." And then I was getting bullied at work. So all of a sudden, an area of my life didn't feel safe. And then I couldn't sleep again. And he took it personally like well, I thought you were safe with me. I'm like, no, something else in my life isn't safe. And it's unraveling my inner world. So when it says areas that promote safety, that's multiple areas for me. And then when it comes to relationship, it's about consent and actually consent every time. So like I've got a male friend. If ever he goes to hug me, he'll do a certain gesture with a little nod, like it's okay if I don't step in. And so I know that I don't have any pressure to hug him, and he's never gonna just come and touch me without my consent. And I've got crying things. I've known him for years, and he still does it. And I'm glad because I don't always want to be touched.
Yeah.
Getting teary.
Yeah.
And so that's like my personal relationships. But even like as a professional, I teach people I always seek consent if I'm gonna touch them or need to
Yeah.
touch them or something. And safe communication. So like people don't need to be aggressive. If something happens, it's owned and discussed and unpacked. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if someone's
Yeah.
aggressive or something, I can't just leave it like, oh, yeah, like I'm going to be safe next time I'm with you because you just swore at me.
Yeah.
Um, I need to actually repair that and feel that they understand why that's not okay. And maybe they'll get one more chance, maybe they won't, because if they did something that bad, I'm probably not going to talk to them again. And I'm
And
joking.
so the why that's not okay, that's what I want to speak to here. So these principles all need the relationships we have with our clients are all in the aim of redressing the things that cause trauma in their lives. So again, whether it's a one-off event here or a prolonged period of feeling unsafe, that's the core of their state of being. So when you talk about safety, the first thing that popped into my mind was Maslow, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You said, talked about you need to be able to pay your rent. You need to know where your next meal is coming from. Those those are basic safety requirements. You need to know that you're physically safe. And so children that I'm talking about in those early years, if developmental trauma has taken place, it comes directly out of them feeling unsafe. And so that's the first thing we have to establish because until they feel safe in the counseling room with us, they're still going to be living in that jangly nervous system. They're not going to be able to process anything either emotionally or cognitively as long as they feel unsafe.
Mm. And I guess I finally eventually got to talk about communication. So like consent around touch and even like what you're eating and stuff like that as a kid, communication, um, and like people keeping their word and things like that. So like
Yeah.
for me, my parents keeping their word, um, and obviously not being physically hurt. So yeah, communication, physical safety
Yeah.
in as a child, but in a client worker relationship. For me, what's important is that consent, communication, follow up and follow through as well. Like you want to know that you're cared for and that
Yeah.
people pay attention and then they follow up things as a like, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, as a counselor. Like I had a counselor who never did that. And I was like, he doesn't give a shit. He's just getting lazy money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when we are consistently safe and that person has been doing the same things the same way for a while, then we can trust.
Yes. And again, ideally, that's what happens in the early environment. Um, yeah. So that's a good picture coming from you experientially. Um, yeah. And that doesn't go away. And you in your stating of your needs, for example, you described in a workplace, well, I need to communicate about that stuff that's not working at the moment. Um, Uh, that's a positive outcome, right? Because communication's always important. So because it's where things get fudged, that people can easily be used or misused. So people who have that innate lack of trust, so that's implicated here, will be acutely aware of when they're not recognized and honored and etc. Safe.
So there, yeah, I was going to come back to that. Like you said, ideally, trust is happening in the early environment. So I know we talked about it ages ago. I think when we did the archetype quiz, and like one of the questions was about have feeling safe in the world, and I was like, no, why would I feel safe in the world? you know, so that feeling there is what's built in childhood. So someone might generally feel safe in the world, and someone else like me might not.
Yeah.
And then when someone like me doesn't feel safe in the world, we're going to be, is what you're saying, like hypersensitive or how hyper noticing when people aren't doing. Yeah. Can you recap that bit?
Uh, I'm not sure exactly what I said.
Or like if people who are, they're innately not trusting, like, and so let's say I'm in the workplace and I'm born, like I've had this experience where now
yes.
I don't trust people very well. It's like, I think you said something like, will be more hyper vigilant.
Yeah, you're acutely aware of when you're um, where your boundaries are being infringed, I suppose, is another way of
Mm.
saying that. Because there's lots of little signs. Now, those people where you get triggered now in those situations, those people might not go any further than you know, saying an odd, unkind thing now and again, but that's not your experience. Your experience is you learn to recognize the signs of when, ultimately, I don't know what the situation, how severe the situation would have been or what it would have been eventually with you, what kind of abuse that it would have been, or it's certainly not my place to say, even if it was. But see, your mind, we learn just like, you know, um, classical conditioning. Uh, we learn when that happens, the next thing that's going to happen is that, and the next thing that's going to happen is that. So that's the narrative that we have going, right? Voices get raised in the kitchen.
And then,
It's,
yeah,
yeah, and then that's right. And then, if I make a peep, one of those loud voices is going to turn their head and look at me and say something threatening to me. And then if I don't freeze and look a particular way, I'm going to hear the loud footsteps coming in my direction. And then I'm going to, whatever that sequence of things might be. Now, in our adult years, of course, we only need that first trigger, right? We only need to hear the raised voices, and all of that plays out in our mind. That's what a trigger is like.
I'm going to disagree for a second.
Oh, no.
I never seen that before. Um, I don't think it happens in our mind, and I know you know that, and
Oh,
sometimes it
okay.
does. And that's how I said, and I know you know that, Gary, I'm joking. Because it's so quick, it's called a trigger because it's so fucking quick and there is nothing in your mind.
Yeah,
So my body takes over, the amygdala takes over, and I have nothing I can do about it. And it's
yeah,
when I unpack it. So I got triggered recently and I cried, and it was only in the 24 hours after that I actually could see and identify all of the reasons I reacted that way.
right. And
Um,
so
you're
now,
right about the narrative, but it happens so quick and automatically. It's not a conscious, which is why CBT doesn't work for me. When
yes.
that happening.
So that's the great learning that I just want to highlight for people out there because you just specifically point out the difference between trauma and just ego defense mechanisms, really. We do learn things in the way that I just described, but they don't
Yeah.
have to be trauma things. And you described trauma, which is what we're here for. So we feel those. And again, I don't know if I used the word neuroception before, but when we get triggered, we feel them in our nervous system, right? And then, yes, we have no control. Absolutely. And that's when using cognitive behavior for what started out as a trauma and lives as a trauma trigger is ineffective.
And I'm trying to keep notes where we're up to. I'm starting a therapy called cognitive processing therapy. And I think essentially it's a little bit like EMDR in that, so you look at the narrative. So we know, like from what I just said, the trigger goes bam, bam, but it's basically doing what you described really fast. And so in CPT, the job is, from my understanding, uh, to aside from the event happening, sit with the counselor and go, what's actually sitting underneath? Why? What beliefs and all that kind of stuff, and then do work around that, like writing activities and all those kinds of things, essentially working to rewire your brain.
Yeah.
It starts to learn that that is actually incorrect. And apparently it gets really good results. So
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
going up
Good.
for my 12 sessions. Um, and the other thing that I wanted to say too is, I was glad that we unpacked that a bit. Um, you were saying people who have that innate mistrust are people who are acutely aware of where their boundaries are being infringed.
Yeah.
And that's been a massive trouble for me in my life. And in the last, I don't know, maybe a year or so, I've decided it's a superpower, and it's a I can't take bullshit superpower. So I'm just more sensitive to bullshit. I don't put up with it. But it is actually the flip side of that is it's like a lot of people put up with a bit of bullshit and they seem to be able to handle it, but it's like I actually can't handle it. And some people seem to think that I should be able to handle it and I can't, and it makes me cry and then I don't work very well. And it's like it makes me feel frustrated that I can see where my boundaries are being infringed and I can see all the different places that's going to go next. And I just can't then step forward.
Right.
I don't know. I'm just saying it because I was kind of like, my note was, what's right though? Like, if I heal more, does that mean I'm just going to put up with more bullshit and get hurt again or what? I don't even know. But yeah.
Well, I guess the question is, can you shift it from a sensory bodily kinesthetic response, which, trips right through that process as you described earlier? Can you shift that, break it down into, whatever the word is, tasks? You know what I mean? That it happens, this is what happens, and that's what happens. And because as soon as you can do that, you're bringing it up into your rational brain, right? So then you can, conceivably at least, bite off that in little pieces. I'm guessing the cognitive processing therapy is something like that.
Maybe I haven't really done it yet. We just started setting it up
Yeah.
because, like, I can't imagine going, this person just broke a boundary. Maybe they'll be nice tomorrow. Like, and people do that, and that I find that very confusing. Like, so when someone is like in domestic violence, for example, someone is very, very horrible and violent, and then part of the cycle of violence is, oh, let's repair the relationship, let's have a honeymoon period, and then let's cause some tension, and now we're going to do it again. So, like, I find it difficult in the world, like, to, especially if I don't really know somebody, to think anything other than that might happen.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. So that's your conditioning,
mm.
right? And not everybody has that same sort of conditioning. However, sorry.
Oh, no, you're okay, you go.
Well, I think of situations like when something really horrible happens in Parliament House, like a rape, then all of the other type of infringements come up for conversation, and rightfully so. They should have been talked about all along, right? And so, you know, the we can probably all agree that rape is a traumatic event, whereas, maybe some dickhead dude, tapping you on the bottom at a staff party isn't a traumatic event, but it's nevertheless an infringement. Now, for somebody for whom that might have started at one point and led later on to more serious abuse, that could very well be a trigger.
Mm.
But what I'm saying is that the the protocol for each of us and in organizations and social circles should be to nip all of those things in the
Mm.
bud.
So that makes me feel a bit better, because I'm along with recognizing that I have an amazing bullshit radar and I can't handle it, and that's a superpower, yay.
With sensitivity as a superpower. Yep.
Yeah. Learning to use my voice calmly without too much stress. And I had an IFS session recently that actually really helped with that, and I've been rocking it. And I
Right.
just say shit, and I'm fine, and there's no aggression in there. I just say it instead of. So this guy who was taking my details to fix my phone, he asked for my address, and I just went, "Oh, you don't need that." And he just looked at me. I'm like, "Well, you don't, do you?" And normally that would be more heat in that.
Right.
'Cause I would feel I need to protect myself and fear, and why does he want my address, and am I gonna get stalked, and, like, whatever happens up here.
Right.
And, I'm like, and he just looked at me and I was like, I just smiled and walked off, like, to go look at phone covers or something.
Right. Yeah. Good for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That was really chill. And, like, I've done it a few times. I was telling Johnny about it. He's like, "Oh, you're acting like me, mum," because Johnny just says stuff and he's like, "Oh, blah, blah, blah," and you're like, "Oh, wow."
Yeah.
So anyway, my point is being able to talk about those boundaries. So I go, okay, someone swore at me and then they minimized it with the bullshit apology.
Yeah.
I am going to talk about it
Yeah.
and it's okay. And if everyone actually did that on a first infringement, the boundary would be set and then less people would hurt each other. So that's cool. I like it.
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have toxic work environments and social situations. And
Mm.
yeah, if it was the way, the accepted way that things are always clean and clear, it would be a very different world. And people who did carry trauma from their background would feel a lot safer.
And that's it. And you also know the other thing too is this isn't on you. I'm just looking at the thing. Two more things. One is the bystander effect stuff. Like I've been talking with a few people about this lately, and Henry Rollins talked about it at his show. If more people actually stood up for each other,
Yeah.
as
Yeah. Good point.
um, so I don't even need to say anymore. Like it's not just us having to stand up for ourselves because sometimes it's very, very hard. And but if we all just took that little bit of step of into the bit of hard that's not ours, then everyone would feel like we have each other's backs.
Yes. Because actually we're talking about making some sort of an impact on our culture if it's more than one person, right? And I have one of my clients works in a particularly male profession, and there's a lot of homophobic talk, and it's kind of like just casual homophobia, right? But this male person, he feels how can I say it's close to his heart, let's say, and yet he doesn't feel safe in saying anything in that environment. He gives himself a hard time
Mm,
for not being able to say something. But of course that would be his thing as well. Wouldn't it be great if somebody else said something?
mm,
Yeah,
yeah. And if I think if anyone in an environment feels like they can, then it's a very good idea. Because like sometimes I don't feel like I have the strength to say anything, and one
yeah,
of my actions is to walk away or
yeah,
to disengage. And if they look at me and they're like, "Hey, Andrea," because someone was trying to do homophobic jokes recently, and I was around, and I was like, I went, he's up, Turbo," like trying to do it laughing. They're like, "We don't do that now. It's 2023."
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Like, how do you actually stand up? And then he kept going, and I was like, "I actually already said 2 things. I'm just gonna put my head in my phone and ignore him. I'm not gonna engage with him. I'm not gonna give him any attention, and I'm not gonna give him any laughter."
yeah,
Because he thought he was pretty funny, and we were like, "No, you're not funny at all."
yeah,
The other thing I wanted to say on all that is, like, in terms of, sensitivity, superpowers, and that kind of thing, as an example, like, so someone recently crossed a boundary, and I've only known them for a little while. They
yeah,
basically have no points in their bank because I
yeah,
don't.
Yeah.
Um, but, like, let's say you and me were talking and we disagreed and you snapped at me a little bit and
Yeah.
had to get off. You're like, "Oh, look, I'm really tired. I snapped. I'm gonna go."
Yeah.
I would actually believe that you and me would reconnect and figure it out, and I wouldn't actually be like, I would have feelings about it, but, like, when I've known someone longer and have more of a solid understanding of who they are and their personality, I wouldn't assume that that was your nature to snap at me because I've never ever seen you do anything like that ever, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I guess I just wanted to say, like, it's
So
not.
so you can build that sense of safety and trust with, person by person or bird by bird, as can't remember
Mm,
her name now, the author would say. Um, yeah, that's a very good point. So, and our purpose here is to talk about these are the principles for trauma counseling. So this is what we
yeah,
need to make
we'll
sure
share this.
of in our counseling room. You've disappeared. Oh, there you are. So for counselors, that's what they need to make sure of in their space, and hopefully in our friendship groups, we can, um, make it make it the standard way of being, that we can trust and feel safe with our friends. In fact, they probably would get filtered out if we couldn't. They wouldn't be there.
I
Um, Go on.
Oh, no, I was just saying, I think I'd like to actually do something like this. I might even do it myself. Like, I've thought about, I've probably told you before, making a welcome pack to me,
Oh yeah,
like, and what's important to me and that kind of thing. And years ago, or for most of my life, probably, I thought if I share triggers and then someone uses them and then I'm like, oh my God, then I'm upset. It's like, well, you know what? I shared it, you used it, go away. But like just these 5 principles done as a podcast just about friendship is a good idea as a
yeah,
start. Mm.
yeah. And you have, I know you well enough to say with great confidence, you have a whole lot to offer the world, whether it's an individual workplace or, larger community or friendships or whatever. And if you could write up that little, what did you call it?
Ah, yeah.
Welcome to me manual.
Mhm.
It could start off with, I have a whole lot of great abilities, skills, values, traits to offer, um, and honoring this little welcome to me pack will ensure that those are given life in whatever relationship we develop.
I like that. And I think it could be one of those things that inspires other people to make their own welcome pack.
Yeah.
Like, because
I have one of my clients who is really hard on herself. And so I've spent a lot of sessions enumerating her great strengths, which were never done. She's somebody similar to me. She's been around a very long time, right? So she's had it tough for a very long time. And not too long ago, I had cause to say, now you remember when I wrote your strengths out to you, that was foremost among them, right? She said, yes, I know. She pulled it out of her pocket. So she, it was important enough to her that she carried around this list of strengths. Yeah,
I like-
sorry. Yeah,
um so we've I really like that story just to say that. Um we've talked about safety and how safety contributes to building trust.
yeah.
And we're trying to stick with the lens of counseling and support work kind of stuff, then the next is choice.
Yeah. So so yes, we have wrapped trust into that state, haven't we? But you spoke well about trust earlier when you said, uh, honor what you say you'll do. That long list of things. Like think of children when we were children. The things that we were disappointed in were probably the things that were promised us that didn't happen.
Mm,
Um, otherwise we couldn't be disappointed in a way, or at least not disappointed in our relations. So that relational trauma we're talking about. So yes, the trust is very important. And in counseling, the what's called unconditional positive regard is incredibly important. This same client I was just talking about, this older person, just went through a number of sessions, just thinking that I would, I don't know, get tired of her or not think she was okay. She thought I would think about her the same way she thought about herself, which is the same way she was treated by her family over a very long period of time. And so, and she would get very angry sometimes and send me what many people would consider abusive emails between sessions. And
Wow.
and I knew that there were lots of really good reasons that she should not trust men.
Mm.
And so for me, it was water off a duck's back. I worked through my rejection stuff a fair while ago. It was a big thing for me once. And so it was water off the duck's back. I would just send a very um, uh, benign, short-winded reply back and say, you know, I look forward to when we're together again on whatever day or whatever it is. I understand your frustrations, whatever. And but over a long period of time, she could really trust me to tell me things that she hadn't told other people before. And yes, and now she's making great progress now. But that trusting relationship was incredibly important for that.
So,
Um,
so as a counselor, do you reckon that the first two here, I'm pointing at my screen like an old lady, no one knows what I'm doing, safety and trust. Do you reckon that a lot of time is spent in the start of a counseling relationship developing safety and trust, but maybe paired with choice?
uh,
All right.
so
Together.
so yes, choice will certainly we need to be aware of. So again, my interest in bringing these up. I know we decided to bring these up, but my particular interest is to help people understand where these come from. So safety, trust, and choice were all taken away from people. And so if we operate in the same way where they were forced to bend to other people's wills when they didn't have the personal agency, the possibility to say no, then we are perpetrating, however benignly or however well-meaning, we're perpetrating the same sort of external need for them to adhere to somebody else's will. And so choice is fundamentally important, even more important than doing the right thing or doing what's good for them. That the choice is actually uh, uh, fundamental.
I have come across something interesting in that I think I kind of made this up, honestly, because of working with people in a way that I need to touch them often. Sounds creepy when I say it like that. Um, I've developed over my time at the studio a kind of a belief and most of the time trying to communicate in a way where people don't actually have to say no. They only need to say yes if they choose to say yes, but they don't need to say no.
Right, that's nice. Did you do that instinctively
Yeah.
or quite deliberately?
I know both. Like, because I realize that it's hard to say no. And I don't think people should have to say no because sometimes they really can't say no
Yeah,
and it's too hard. And if you just say, like, say we're doing photos at the studio, we'll say, we want to do a photo for social media. If you'd like to be involved, just come to this side of the room. You don't have to say yes or no.
yeah,
Um, I asked a staff member to stay, but I didn't want them to feel like they had to say no and put them in a bad situation internally. So I said, I would really like you to stay. If you are happy to stay, please reply yes by this date. Otherwise,
yeah,
you don't need to reply.
yeah, good,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
good for you.
Thanks, man. I like it.
A- And so, and then another thing that I would like to mention here, because as I said, just taught a few intensive workshops lately, so it's on my mind. There's this wonderful woman, a leader in the field really of trauma, and her name's Babette Rothschild. And so traditionally, it was felt that healing trauma had to entail a re-experiencing of the trauma, exposure, it was called. I can see oh no, I don't have to go far, but I'm running out of power, but I can just plug in here. Um, Now, Babette Rothschild throws a great light on that. He, because in the life of choice, he said, actually, what's most important is that people feel better and, that they get back to some sort of level of functioning and stability where they can manage their lives. And so that's the stabilization, the first process, often, or the first phase of healing trauma. When people can get to that point, then they can choose whether or not to explore their traumas. Because for some people, it will entail a great deal of upheaval and discomfort in their lives. And that might not be what they want. So we don't enter into working with trauma with the automatic thought that, we need to take you again through your traumatic experiences so you can get some distance and understanding and slot it into the right time frame in your biography. So that she's a very refreshing woman. She's a bit of a renegade, not a renegade, no, but a rebel. Um, and she's quite an older woman. That should be in her 70s. So she's been around a long time. She's earned her stripes. What's that? That's exactly the interviews that I show little clips of in my
I wish I read the
classes.
year that I got this book. It smells old. But this actually helped me a lot in giving me permission to not have to get triggered by therapists that didn't know what they were doing. So,
Right.
like, there's people who have done little courses or a bit of training or whatever, but they haven't spent too much time really understanding. And I just think, like, even I really appreciated breath work, but I actually feel like um, people probably need to have some other tools in their tool belt before they do it, because you might see something by accident that you weren't ready for, and you might have feelings that like are quite big and you didn't know you were going to have. For
Yeah.
example, like I'm saying, I wouldn't do that as my first port of call with therapy. And the thing is, people say, "Oh, the body doesn't do what it's not ready for." Maybe it fucking does. You don't know that. Like, and I had some experiences and flashbacks when I had breath work that I wasn't um
Like,
it threw me. It threw
yeah.
me a bit, and I didn't feel
Same.
safe enough in my own life to be able to do that. You said something, sorry, what?
No, safe.
Mm,
I
mm,
said the words that you didn't feel safe. That's
mm.
right. Going back to that key principle, the first principle of working with trauma.
Yeah, and yeah, so that book helped me a lot, and um,
Do you want to just hold that up again so people can read the
share
title?
it. I'll share it as 8 keys
To safe
to safe
trauma
trauma
recovery.
recovery. Take charge strategies to empower your healing. My understanding of Babette rather is she actually is a survivor as well.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when a survivor has gotten themselves, she's a psychotherapist and has learned a lot of stuff and is telling us how to stop flashbacks. Well, I'm going to listen. So, um, and now back to choice. Was there anything else you want to say about that? Because I was thinking about something I had happen recently, like a,
I would just again underscore that so people there's there's a wonderful one of the videos I might have mentioned before. Um, it's hard to imagine for people who did not feel trapped, is the word you use, in their childhood home, let's say, the amount of anxiety, anticipatory violence, or whatever it is, anxiety that young people live with because of the unstable characters in their home. And then Nadine Burke Harris, I might have mentioned her before, she gives a TED talk on childhood trauma. And
Who?
she's talking about the fight, flight, and freeze responses. And and the way she describes it is, the adrenaline kicks in, our cortisol rushes through us, and we're ready. We see a bear in the woods, and the fight, flight, freeze response saves our lives, right? Fantastic. And so we get the hell out of there or whatever we do. He says, but what happens when that bear comes home at 5 o'clock every day?
Hmm.
So imagine this child in this environment, knowing the volatility that will walk through the door every day at 5 o'clock. And the point about choices, there's no choice in that, right?
Yeah.
They can't decide I'm going to go get my own apartment now at the age of 5 or something like that. And yeah, so that wreaks havoc on the nervous system, and that's how we experience. So trauma lodges itself in the nervous system, and that's where the triggers affect us, as you so aptly pointed out earlier. And that's why choice becomes so important because people were in situations where they didn't have choice, even if it was you also couldn't escape from the trenches during the war, right? You would have been sentenced by the military for whatever. And or yeah.
Or
So
shot by the opposition.
yeah, that's right. If you got up and decided I'm not going to stay here anymore, yeah, you stood up and walked and there you go. Or if you were in a bus crash or whatever it is, you didn't have
Mhm.
any choice about those things. Yeah.
Of the lady who made the video, something Harris.
Nadine Burke Harris, a hyphenated last name, Burkeharris.
Um,
He was the director of mental health for the state of California for a while.
yeah, right.
She gives a great TED talk. I can't remember what it's called, but if
Oh,
you
really?
go in looking for, she's got this bright crimson colored dress on. And she's an African American, so she's got a very dark skin and this bright crimson dress. That's how I always find her so on YouTube. Yeah,
Um,
so you were going to say something about
yeah,
choice.
we haven't talked heaps about the impact of when this stuff isn't followed. Like I touched on earlier, if someone in a new relationship with me in any capacity, work or whatever, breaks their word or
No,
crosses boundaries, they're gonna not get close to me. Whereas if someone, I don't know, for a long time does something, like if someone broke their word, I would feel more big about it than if someone snapped a little bit, for example. But what I wanted to say about it's with choice, like I have found it as a user of health services. If I'm not actually given choice, it can be quite impacting on me and my voice and being triggered. So I got a second opinion, and that's me trying to have choice. So I got a second opinion
right.
for something to do with my kidneys. And then the guy looked at this test and he said, "Oh, they didn't test for this. Oh, what does it say in the last test, which was 2015?" He's like, "Oh, well, the levels were high then. So you have to have this medication." And he pointed his finger, "You have to have this medication. It's going to give you gout and rashes,
Ooh,
but you have to have it." Right? Um, I had no voice. I was just like, "Mm, are there other options? I don't want to have gout. I didn't really understand gout. I had to Google gout, you know? Um, but to be told by an older white man that I have to do something with my body and be given no choice and have my
yeah,
autonomy taken from me. I cried in my car when
right.
I managed to freeze enough to not fall apart. And then I wept and wept and wept in my car.
Yeah,
And then I figured out I didn't have to do what he said. It took me a bit, but I was like, actually, I don't have to do what he said.
yeah,
Um, and so not being given choice. And the reason I went to him was because I wasn't actually feeling that comfortable with the first doctor, who incidentally I went back to uh, the other day. And I asked him about, just as a side, I asked him about all the levels that he tried to medicate me for. I didn't even need the medication as it happens. But anyway, so because I was uncomfortable, there's not that many nephrologists around. I went back to the first one and I meant to bring a friend with me and I forgot. So then I wrote a script for before. So before I went in, I wrote a script of like what I'm going to say.
Right.
And so I got in there and he very seriously looks at me and he goes, "So have you been taking your medication?" And I'm like, my hands on the table and I said, "Let's restart." Like I was a bit playful. I'm like, "Let's restart. I really actually need autonomy and choice for me to be okay.
Good for you.
Yeah, man. And I would like to have a bit more involvement in my care and the decisions made for my body. Would that be okay?" Literally like that. I'm just by myself. I'm like, maybe let's go out. And he goes, "Yeah." Like he looked so taken aback. But then he actually really changed his tune. So I didn't answer his question. I said, "Let's start with my results. That's what I would like to talk about first. Thank you." So I didn't even answer his question. And then I got to the end and I asked him my questions about everything. And then I told him the answer to his question, which was no, because I've been doing it myself and getting the results I want. And so then he asked me how I wanted to proceed, which he'd never talked to me that way before until I advocated for myself. And I said, "Well, I would actually like to do more regular tests. Am I allowed to do that?" And he said, "Yes." And I could do it through my GP. And then he asked if I wanted to continue to see him or would I like to wait till I'm sick again? And I said, "No, I'd like to continue to see you every year, please." And he said, "Okay." And so it was like, it would be nice if health practitioners all came to their daily practice with a lens of choice. But I guess I wanted to share that for anyone listening. You can write a script and you can go in there and say that straight off the bat with a smile on your face. So there you go.
And you know what I think of when you say that. I don't know. I can't remember our early chats now and how much history I gave. But when we talk about the ethical principles of counselors, they come about in this arena of what we call person-centered therapy. And that was inaugurated decades ago by a man named Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers was a doctor, but all of the people before him who were doing what they considered to be therapy were also doctors, but they followed that exact medical model that you just described. And
Mm,
Carl Rogers brought about person-centered therapy as a response to not not bringing the client and the client's knowledge of themselves, their innate knowledge of themselves, into the equation when they were giving out diagnoses and medication and telling people what they needed to do. And so that's why we have those principles of person-centered therapy. And it's called person-centered therapy. It went through a process. It was first called non-directive therapy. And then it was called, yeah, and then it was called, well, yes, that was appropriate. It was a response to directive therapy. We
mm.
went from non-directive therapy to client-centered therapy before it became person-centered therapy. So, what it was really trying to do was to balance the equation and make relationships equal between two people,
Mm.
which
And
you which you did so beautifully in your own way.
thanks. I had years of not being listened to and ignored and having my voice squished. And I was
Right,
born with a kidney condition, and the amount of times I've gone to hospital in an urgent fashion and been told it's something else. I'm like, "No, this is my body. I know what it is."
right.
And be ignored and then medicated wrongly and had costs. So, um, and also, yeah, so learning to speak for myself gives me choice, but it would be nice if people did that.
Yeah.
And that causes collaboration, I guess, doesn't it? So I'm just
It,
gonna read it rather than share it.
yeah, they go
Collaboration,
hand in hand.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, there's collaboration between client and counselor, but then this also talks about maximize collaboration between healthcare staff, patients, and their families.
Right.
So, like, my new counselor, like I have two at the moment, um, one of them was wanting to talk to you because we spoke a while ago, right? And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, I talked to him and I forgot," but it's a while ago. But I don't actually mind in terms of my well-being. I'm not gonna hide anyone from anybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, if and I'm more than happy for my team Andrea, to collaborate for my best interest, you
Yeah.
know? So Joe, who does IFS, and Zoe, who does the CPT, they had a big old chat. And I'm like, yep, sign the forms, go for it. I don't need to be a part of it. And I don't like, there's someone who said recently, nothing about me without me, which I don't necessarily agree with, in that, like, I want people to feel comfortable to say what they actually really think and write a report, and I'll read it and then ask questions. But I want people to feel comfortable to actually say what they really
Yeah,
think.
good. And I would predicate that on the fact that you probably trust those people, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If I didn't, I wouldn't even say their name. Yeah. Or I wouldn't even tell. I would keep a secret. No, not really. I probably wouldn't. I can't lie very well. So I like that collaboration, and then also family as well. Like, there's something happening in the background. I've started talking to Johnny about it a little bit. Of all the people in the world who would know the answer to the question, it would be him,
Right.
because he's seen all the faces of me. You know, he's seen me wildly triggered in a little ball on the floor.
Yeah.
He's seen me sprint. We actually had a chat with him and his girlfriend. I had a chat with him and his girlfriend, which we all had a big chat. And I shared some stuff with her so she actually knows what's happening. Because I'm having all this therapy, and Johnny's like, Mum, you've been doing this for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I said, well, ever since you were little, when you could understand things, I said I was going to the brain doctor or the feelings doctor. And he's like, how come it's so hard? And I actually told him the truth, that he never knew before. I'm like, "Do you actually wanna know? Because I've never told you." And he's like, "Okay." I'm like, "You okay, Laura?" And she's wide-eyed, she's like, "Yep, okay." And, um, and then Johnny was like, "Oh my god." I'm like, "Now do you know why I have trouble?" And he's like, "Yes." And, but it was actually nice to have an honest chat. Now he's 27 and actually shares some of the truth, but by the same token, if I have to have an assessment, I trust him to share his truth
Right.
if I need to have that. So that collaboration.
Yeah. Good. He's a wise young man.
He is, isn't he?
Yeah.
Um, did you have anything else to say about collaboration?
Uh, not specifically. Like there are things like choice and collaboration, which I recognize I've been at this work for 20 odd years now. And they seem like, well, of course you would give people choice. Of course you would collaborate with people, right? They're just common sense to me now. Although I do know the medical model that we just discussed is prevalent also. And by the time people move into positions of feeling like they know what they're doing, have some sort of expertise in their field, they might perchance follow that model and think they should be telling people how things
Mm,
are. But in fact, if we take the human being into account, we're undermining their humanity when we do that. Yeah, so one of the great principles of person-centered therapy is actually it's our job to grow the person, to help the person grow, not to solve their problems per se.
mhm.
If we can help people grow, they can solve their own problems. So yeah, collaboration then just becomes, an essential cog in that wheel.
And it's funny how you say, like, it's just common sense. Like, I was doing marking for an RTO years ago, and it was for, like, youth work and diploma of youth work. And I wrote a lot of feedback when I felt it was necessary. But, like, sometimes it's not common sense. Like, the
Yeah,
stuff that people were writing, I'm like, "You should not be allowed to work with humans, you should work with flowers."
right.
Like, "This is a bad idea. Who's letting you do this?"
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
'Cause, yeah, it's not always common sense. And then, like you said, the medical model is so prevalent, and then you've got people's ego. They're like, "I studied this, I know, so I'm gonna
yeah,
tell you." And it's like, "Well, I live in this body."
yeah,
Um, and I just think generally, overall, I think in every direction. So I've just been working in the India. I've met some people I haven't ended up working with, and I've with some people. And in that space, the client is like a little god sometimes, depending on how old they are and what level. So if they're like an independent, they're managing their own funds. And I've come across a couple of women who it's their way or the highway. It's like, well, I'm the client. But it's like, no, we're actually all humans. We're all of equal value. And
Yeah.
so, like, someone was running a session and it had to be a certain methodology, and it went for ages. They popped a bit of IFS in there, even though they said it's just this methodology. And then I'm like reading the room and thinking, if we chucked some CBT in here today, that would actually work. A little bit of evidence checking and reframing, this conversation would be over. You know, like I'm not opposed to that when it's needed, right? But my point is, like, I came to my doctor the other day with the respect that he's a studied man, and I acknowledged, I said, "Oh, no, I'm not a doctor. I said, I've got ADHD, so I researched a lot," you know, and I just feel like it still needs to be two-way. I'm not gonna go in as the client and go, "I'm the client, do what I say."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah? That's
Gotcha.
what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
saying. Yeah, yeah.
That wouldn't be collaborative.
No, no, but what I'm saying is, like, it needs to be both ways.
Yeah,
Like, just the worker coming to it with these 5 things, like, as a
yes.
client, I need to keep my counsellor safe by not having a temper tantrum and throwing something at them, for example.
Yeah, yeah,
Like like it's two-way street. If we help people grow, they can help themselves. That's what you said. We have one more. We have empowerment. It's an interesting one. I have feelings about that word.
Oh, go on, speak your feelings, girl.
Speak my truth. Build upon a patient's strength and experiences. I think that, like, the way that's put is fine. Like, empowerment is to build on, and again, that's in collaboration. People make choices about their goals. You would talk about somebody's strengths and support them to become empowered. I'm not a fan of when people say they like I wouldn't say I empowered you. Like I'm not like
Right,
this God with the empowerment power.
right.
Like, you see what I mean? It's like I think the person becomes empowered when we are working together and they work out some things, they become empowered.
Yeah.
I didn't put it on them like I dub thee now empowered.
No, I know.
I could be wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
What do you think?
Yeah. No, I know what you mean, and it is I said something a few minutes ago, and I felt exactly the same thing when I said, I I felt it as I said it, that our job is to help people grow from the inside out. That's still my intention for somebody else, right? It is
Mm,
actually, there's a truth to it. That's the mindset that I have to have. Um, that's kind of my philosophy of work or whatever it is. And yet it's still the language of it is a bit condescending. It puts me in the seat of um, I'm the one who's doing something in order to. Yeah, I don't even know. I'm thinking about it as I go here, but I did feel it when I said it, and you just said that in terms of empowerment in exactly the same way.
yeah, I think, like, I don't know, it'd be interesting to unpack or have a bit more of a think about it because I think in terms of personal vision, if you were to say, like, as my personal vision, I would like to be a part of people's growth, maybe.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd be a part of people's growth
yeah,
or support people to grow, but, like, supporting is still like, it's all intentional, and I think it's okay to have an intention like, your personal value, like, you believe in soul and the longer your intention is to help people grow from the inside out, that's okay.
yeah,
Um, and people will work with you if that's what they wanna do, but you're just supporting people to do it. I thought on my
yeah.
boss, damn it.
So I don't know what just happened then. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, yeah. My
So
alarm I thought I didn't have it.
I couldn't hear it through here, but so the way Carol Rogers spoke about that, same person I just described who thought, who's started person-centered therapy, he said the onus is on us to create a therapeutic environment where people can uh, thrive or heal or
Mm,
whatever it is. And so that kind of deals with that in a way that I create this safe space through these same principles and that the personal attributes I need to carry into that safe space, but also that help create that safe space are empathy, congruence that you talked about earlier, leading to trust, because I practice what I preach, and the other one being the unconditional positive regard that I mentioned.
What was that last one again? Something positive regard?
Unconditional.
Positive regard.
Yeah.
That's
But
interesting.
I think very highly of you. And even despite, um, I'm not going to encourage you, if you beat somebody up or something like that, I'm not going to encourage your actions or think highly of your actions. But beneath all of that, I have unconditional positive regard for you as a human being. That's what this older woman, I'm getting a lot of mileage out of her today, aren't I? But that's what she doesn't get, that she can share all of her shadow stuff with me, the black, she calls it, and I can still have this unconditional positive regard. Because that's not how I regard, the stuff that she thinks is so awful. That is not at all how I regard her at all. But her positive qualities come out all the time. And sometimes I just have to say, that's not how I see you. And that is very powerful for her, who's been, had this taken on this view of her from her cruel family all her life.
And you take a lot from people too. Like I don't know. Like I don't think I had a view from my family of anything bad about me. I just got treated badly. Just got treated badly.
Yeah, so you just jumped to a conclusion, right? That you were
Yeah,
something wrong
that's
with
a fair
you.
way of putting it. Because sometimes I get confused about that.
Yeah. Yeah. What they call actions speak louder than words. Yeah.
And that is one of those real core beliefs that I have. Like if people just type something on a fucking Facebook status and don't actually pick up the phone and talk to me or connect with me,
Right.
I'm like,
You don't take it seriously.
don't say I love you, I love you, I love you, and then don't actually show me that. Like it's pointless.
Yeah, hello. Yeah.
Have you got anything else to say on the 5? What is that? 5? I'll finish with the slides so we can see it one more time.
4 principles. Again, I think just to underscore that those are really important because they redress the original cause of the trauma. They're not just nice ways of being that are respectful to people. They're absolutely necessary with trauma. A person grew up lacking safety, not having trust in relationships, not being given choice. That's the nature of trauma.
Yeah. So that's how come this model and those 3 things in particular are super important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we had the ones at the start, with what was it? Transparency was paired with trust. There was peer support and there was humility.
And transparency, I think it.
Didn't really talk about humility in a little descriptor, but I actually think humility is important as a practice as a human because we always have something to learn.
Yeah.
And we aren't actually the expert of everything.
Yeah.
And we're not the expert of everyone else.
Yeah. I think what we've said around being person-centered takes care of that humility. And I think what we said around choice and collaboration takes care of the transparency.
Takes care of what takes care of transparency? Oh my God, I can't write quick enough.
It was humility. How did they phrase it?
No. I was saying what takes care of transparency. You said person-centered. Collaboration takes care.
Yeah, the choice and collaboration. People can't make choice unless they have all the information, right?
Yep.
So when I work with people, I'm not one of those, traditional psychoanalysts who sit back with their book. I do take notes in a book, but I don't go, interesting, and carry on that way. I'm very transparent in what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and also person-centered takes care of that it used the word responsiveness in terms of being aware of cultural
Yes.
trauma over longer generational trauma.
Yeah. Diversity is the word that gets used now.
What is the word?
Diversity is the word that gets used, that we recognize that actually everybody, we can talk about race, creed, and culture, but those are very big cohorts, right? Everybody who's a particular color or a particular religion. Yes, we should honor those things about them, but in fact, we should honor the individual. And if we're totally open, and i.e., that is responsive to what's being said, instead of making any sort of assumptions, that is honoring diversity in an individual.
Mm. And that's another good thing too, just as a general thing, not to make assumptions. That old makes
Yeah.
an ass out of you and me. Mostly the ass.
You and me, yeah. Assume makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably it on that topic for today.
Yeah.
Five key things, 4 things. Anything else you want to add? I thought we've
Have a great weekend.
actually talked out. I'm going to press stop recording so I can say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody on the internet.
Bye.
That's a wrap. Thank you for staying with me through this conversation. If you heard yourself in anything we talked about today, please know this: what happened to you is not your fault. Change is possible. Growing, healing, building a life beyond survival, evolving, even if right now it feels far away. And I'm going to keep reminding you of that because I've done it and I've supported other people to do it as well. Before I share the practices, if you liked the episode, please do like, share, and subscribe. If you liked the resources we talked about, you'll be able to find them in the show notes. Now, to practical things and some questions. The first one's a question. In this episode, Garry shares about a project that I made for myself and I'm maybe going to bring to the world soon if people like the idea, which is a welcome pack. It's a welcome to me guide for people I'm close to. It was kind of focused on the things that I need help with and struggle with, but he made a lovely point, which is to focus on the strengths and abilities that I bring to a relationship. And when I work with other people, I think about their strengths and use a strengths-based approach. And a lot of people don't treat themselves the way they treat other people. So I thought that was a lovely idea. But it's like the key things you need to know about ADHD or complex PTSD and like a little info pack. If you like the idea of sharing that information and learning that information, write welcome pack in the comments and I will make it happen in 2026. Along with the other things like secret superpower knickers, which you may know about them. They're coming. So the practices or activities that you can do, one is something to contemplate, which is, what is trauma-informed care for you? What does it mean? What really matters to you in your relationships with your friends, and also what matters in relationships with professionals such as service providers. For me, consent is queen all the way. It looks like knowing what's happening for my body and my life and that I'm involved in decisions made about me. There's a saying, I'm not sure where it comes from, I can't remember it. Anything is for me is not without me. I can't remember it. Not, no, cut. When it comes to the dentist, it looks like having that explained to me too. Like, I'm not just going to trust them putting things in my mouth. I want to hear, I'm putting 3 more things in your mouth and somebody else is getting involved. I like to know what's going on, and that's okay. Some people might think that that's controlling, but when you've been through trauma, it's about body autonomy, and not freaking the F out. But how you do it matters as well. So what matters for you when it comes to trauma-informed care and your relationships professionally and personally? What do you really wish people would honor about your experience, is another way of putting that. And it's good to think about these things because we can get upset and not really know why if these things don't happen. But if we think about them, we can communicate our needs, which is a whole other thing, right? Next is contemplating how can we move back into our window of tolerance. So this is more than contemplating. You might actually try a few practices and see if you can teach yourself to come to your center in a calm way when you have become dysregulated. So if you become hot or if you become flat and doom scrolly, how can you come back to center so that you can move to that processing at a more appropriate time? and in a safe way. And we can learn to notice that we're triggered. And I do honor that it can take quite a while to learn, and it can be a fair bit of work to learn. I know that for me, I wrote on my phone screensaver to find the space between stimulus and response. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that this week for homework. And I reckon it took me about 10 years. So that's why I bring that work to the people, because I think it is really, really important. And it is the first thing that we need to do. So what practices can you use? For me, one way I do this is via a resource Garry taught me, and then we made it together, which is a mindfulness practice that helps you tune into your true self. The more time you spend at the core of who you are, rather than our often wobbly parts, the more you'll notice when your parts slip in to take over, which we'll do, we've probably already done a podcast on that. So you'll be able to get that mindfulness practice linked in the show notes. Other resources, if you're heightened, you might push your hands into a wall, push it back into a wall. You might hold ice. Wall pushing can also help when you're flattened. Gentle movement can help when you're flattened. Wrapping yourself up in a soft blanket can help when you're flattened, because you need to nurture yourself out of it, not push yourself out of it. So that's all for the practices. You'll find them in the show notes as well. Please like, share, subscribe, all that. And thank you for doing your work to evolve, doing a bit for what I like to call the superpowered evolution. If we all do our bit, it will be a revolution. And wouldn't that be exciting? Because the more of us that heal, the more of us will heal. See you next time.